Hi everyone, I'm Jay Clam, and today I'm very excited to share my first ever interview with you, featuring my longtime friend Patricia. We went to high school together, and we didn't go to the same undergrad, but we did end up working together in the same company. She went on to do the Yale MBA and even planted the idea in my mind to do an MBA myself. So she's got a lot of knowledge to share on how to get into the Yale MBA and what her experience was like. So let's get started. Some of these questions I haven't even asked you yet, so I'm kind of curious what your answers are. We'll just start with, can you just tell everyone a little about yourself?
Yeah, I went to UC Berkeley. And then afterwards, I went into consulting at KPMG. I did that for 2-ish years, a little under 2 years before I decided that really wasn't the industry for me. But I was working in the tech vertical while I was at KPMG and decided I wanted to try that out.
Oh,
Living in Silicon Valley, I had to try out the industry and then moved over to Cisco Meraki and worked the gambit of jobs there, like started in support and then moved over to hardware engineering and did like from compliance to like production quality and all of that. So that was a lot of fun. But then one day I just decided that working on hardware really wasn't my end all be all. And I wanted to do something a little bit more social impact focused or like sustainability focused. So that's when I decided to apply for my MBA. Ended up at Yale, and now I'm at Grailed, which is a Recommerce site. It's like a Gen Z eBay. It's still the whole Recommerce
oh,
industry.
Recommerce. That's the first time I
Yeah,
heard of
yeah.
that. I'm going to learn so much
Really?
from this conversation.
Fastest growing vertical in fashion.
Really?
Yeah. Isn't that
Right.
like hopeful? That's hopeful, right?
That is really hopeful.
Apparently, it's just like Gen Z, they're really excited about sustainability, or at least they
Sustainability,
like
yeah.
have grown up with this being like a common topic of conversation. So apparently buying vintage, buying secondhand is just something that's like they think secondhand first. The luxury space specifically is really
Okay.
cool to drive it because a lot of their pieces are limited edition anyways. The sneakerheads and like the people who are collecting these really high-end pieces, like they're already buying and selling with each other.
Mm.
Grail was originally founded with the idea of giving people like a safe platform in order to do that. Luxury brands specifically are like getting into it as well and trying to help push through things like authentication or trying to create separate supply chains.
Do you get a discount?
We get a like a style purchasing program.
I want my like discount vintage Chanel. Well, I know you've talked to me before about why you chose the Yale MBA, but can you explain to everyone why you chose the Yale MBA over the other MBAs and maybe what other
Yeah.
MBAs you were considering?
So, like I alluded to in the beginning, my big thing in wanting to leave Meraki was trying to do something a little bit more values aligned. And for me, that was just in like social impact. One of the biggest things that you hear about Yale is that our slogan is for business and society, which I really thought was corny at first when I read it. But I visited and spoke to a bunch of students and the staff there, which was shocking for me. Like I could speak to the staff there. And it really did seem like the curriculum was integrated with this. If we're taking a supply chain class and you're like, oh, let's talk about like the sustainability of supply chains and what the future looks like. And that was a big draw. The schools that it came down to, the two that I was considering was like Wharton and Yale. Yale was always my first choice, but like Wharton just came across the table and I was like, how do you say no to Wharton? But I had a lot of friends around me who were at Meraki really know like why I was so restless in a job that like looks really good on paper. And they're like, you're looking for something that's more on the sustainability side of things. You're looking for something that is more aligned with like what you care about. If you go to a school like Wharton, which is mainly known for finance, then there's like a good chance that you're going to end up in a role like that after your MBA. And you just want to think about whether or not you want to surround yourself with that type of environment versus Yale, which is probably going to keep you a little bit more accountable. And so I think those were like the two big things, the school being aligned with what my interests are, as
Mm.
well as just like making this decision as a means to like keep myself accountable for what I said I would do when I would go into the program.
Do you think that it lived up to that expectation?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure it like kept me accountable at every point when I was thinking about the gambit of career opportunities within this space. Like I literally went through VC slash impact investing, product
Mm.
management. I like did check myself against like, okay, is this like at least semi-aligned with what you said you would do? So I think like on that like front for sure. On the front of the school, I would say truthfully, like the curriculum itself is a little bit weak on it. Like I think we're a new school. There's like a lot of room for them to grow and develop some of like the larger programs that are just like centers for social impact. Like we don't quite have that as established yet. But I will say like the value of going to Yale is really because we have a lot of people who come from like the nonprofit background or like government jobs who are looking to transition out of it. Or we have like a bunch of other students who are coming from like backgrounds like me, more corporate, looking to
Yeah.
transition into it. And so like you get like a wealth of knowledge from
Mm.
people. And so like, talking to them, like when I was thinking about government jobs, again, really explored the
Yeah.
gambit. I could just call up like a friend and we like sat and we talked for like 2 hours, just like, you know, what are the types of government opportunities that are out there? Will I really make an impact or should I go into the private sector? And that was super useful. And when I was trying to like decide my summer internship was like, oh, is impact investing really like what I want to do? I called up my lecturer for one of my like private capital and impact investing classes. And she just sat on she's like the CEO of this like multi-million dollar fund. She was like big fish. And she just got on a call with me and was like, yeah, let's just talk about your very like
Oh.
funny internship decision process. I mean, it was like, oh, should I do impact investing, a nonprofit, or product management? Like, it was kind of funny because it just felt so elementary in contrast to like who she was as a person. But she was so willing to just sit down and like hash out the pros and cons for everything. I
Mm.
think that type of built-in like mentorship from the student and faculty is just like unparalleled.
Yeah, I think I felt a little about that with how the Oxford MBA was not traditional. So you got people from like government and corporate and like nonprofit all in the
Yeah.
same space, but looking to like maybe trade spaces.
Yeah, and a bunch of people came up and were like, "Oh, how's tech?" I
Yeah.
think that's like one of the few times where you kind of get like an unbiased view of like what an industry or a job in an industry
Mm.
actually looks like, right? Like
Yeah,
in an interview, they'll tell you the highlights, but they certainly are not
exactly.
trying to tell you the low lights, right?
Can you tell us how you prepared for the application process?
Yeah, so it was such a journey for me. I actually got into Yale off of the wait list. So like it was a struggle. Like Yale was my first choice during my first round and I was like devastated. So like round one, I applied to a couple schools and it was bad because I didn't get into any of them and I was waitlisted for Yale. Round two, I applied to a second set of schools. So round one, I think I applied to Harvard, Stanford, Yale, MIT. Yeah, it was MIT.
Okay.
I think it was those four. And I got rejected from all three of those and then waitlisted for Yale.
Mm.
Second round, I applied to Wharton, Kellogg, Ross. I got into all of them during round two. And I say the difference was like, obviously, maybe some of them is tiering of schools, but like the first round, I wrote very like traditional essays as per an admissions counselor told me to.
Mhm.
Like they read over my essay and they're like, no, you need to be very like traditional, write a sob story and like how you overcame it. I was like, wow, this feels very inauthentic, but they're like, just submit it, it'll be fine. TLDR, it was not fine. So I think the biggest thing I would say about the admissions process, like, and even for Yale, like I rewrote an essay as like my supplemental, like, oh, what have you done between like then and now to make you
Mm.
a better candidate? And I think like all of those are much better received. Like I got scholarships on my essays that I kind of like first drafted. Tell your own story and like make sure it like makes sense for who you are and just like be okay with those
Mm.
essays instead of like listening to what they say on like clear admit or what they have on like admission counselor websites. Having been on the other side now where I like interview people and have like spoken to admissions at Yale a little bit more, I know for sure your authentic essays are so much more interesting to read and so much more dynamic.
Did you read? You didn't read people's essays, right? You're not on AdCom, but
No, I didn't read the
yeah.
essays. I spoke to admissions and they're like talking about it.
Oh.
And they're saying too, yeah, it's like a lot more interesting when people can tell a story that's interesting.
Can you tell when you're interviewing with them that they have sort of crafted their story to fit into this
Oh,
mold?
yeah. People will like shuffle their stories around. Sometimes they don't, and it's really funny.
Ooh,
Like you can see that in the interviews where they're really telling, like, oh, like, after work, I like mentor people and like volunteerism has always been a thing for me. Like, I'm sure all those things are true, but it felt very much like they know that Yale is for business and society, and therefore that's why they're saying all these things versus
yeah.
someone just saying like, "Oh, hey, I just have like a lot of interest in this space, and like, this has always been a hobby of mine or something." Like, just to tell your real story of what you actually
Mhm.
did.
Yeah, I guess just because the process is so mysterious, people are like, we will try anything.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's just not to the fall of anyone, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
sure I did a lot of that same stuff. It's just like you feel like you have to, right? This school's known for finance. Like you're gonna be like, oh, love finance. In fact, when I did Wharton, my whole thing was social impact, and like
Mm.
I, got in on that story, which was surprising.
Let's move to some highlights of the MBA.
I will preface by saying I had like a kind of weird MBA experience as class of
Oh, yes.
2021. But I think the highlights for me is really like, okay, corny, but definitely just like the people I've met.
Mm.
I'm out in Seattle right now, and prior to going to my MBA, like did not know anyone in Seattle, but now I know 30 people, just like the cohort of SOMers who decided to move out here. To also clarify, I didn't move out here for work. I just chose to move out here because I love it. The other big thing is just being able to go to Yale. Like Yale lets you take classes both inside SOM and outside of SOM. And one of my like a lot of my favorite classes actually were outside of SOM. I took a class that was like cross-listed with Yale Law.
Okay.
Jackson, which is our school for international policy. And it
Oh.
was just one of those like seminar type class. The lecturer was some person at Goldman, not remembering his title, I'm sure. He's like running Goldman South Africa. It was so cool just to like hear his perspective. And he knew so many people and he brought them in as guest speakers. And just to say that like I've had that experience is really cool. I also took like Chinese at Yale College.
Oh, yeah.
Like actually learned a decent amount of Chinese. I took a food capstone at the School of Environment. And that was just one of my big goals, is to kind of take a class across the campus and as many
Mhm.
departments as I could. And the fact that you can like easily fit that into your schedule and they like treat you exactly as if you were part of that
Mm.
college, very fun.
How many of the, like, was it your second year that you got to choose, I suppose, any electives or courses?
Yeah, it is your second year where you start to be able to take electives outside of SOM.
Can you talk about the first year of the coursework?
So SOM has a required core. And so like you have to take a series of like ethics management as well as like your classic econ classes. You're put into cohorts. Like the class is split into, I guess, 5 or 6 different cohorts that
Okay.
go by colors. I was in blue cohort. Okay. And your cohort itself is like 60 to 70 people, and you take all your core curriculum classes with them the first year. And those courses are good. It's like a good way to refresh what you learned in undergrad if you were a business major, or get up to speed, I guess. Get up to speed if you have like a business background. I think they do a decent job of teaching to the middle. There's a class that actually a lot of people don't like. It's like a spreadsheets class, but I think it actually helped me upskill my modeling. This one is called sourcing and managing funds,
Oh,
where they like
okay.
make you do like a financial projection for a company. They like tell you the idea of how to make a financial
Okay.
model,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you learn from your peers how to actually make a financial model. And I can say this is like a highlight as well as like a learning. I was doing for a company, and like part of the assignment was like I had to make a financial model, and when I used like the info from that core course, and also like my friend who was like recruiting for iBanking just like sat down and helped me like taught me
Mm,
how to build the rest of it out.
nice.
And that was amazing.
Would you say the coursework was like a good level of difficulty?
The courses themselves are not hard. Like some are harder than others just
Okay.
because if you don't have a finance background, it is. But the most brutal part about your first year is that you're always trying to balance like your coursework with
Mhm.
recruiting, with like your social life.
Mm.
It is hectic. First year I was there, like it was pre-COVID. It was always just like calendars booked like 7 to like who knows when in the night. But it's a lot of fun and it's just like as long as you remember to like kind of breathe and figure
Mm.
out which events you really want to go to, then it's totally doable and it goes by so quickly.
How is the recruiting like for the 2 years and for yourself and for your peers?
I think this is the same for a lot of schools. Consulting and banking kind of start like really early. Basically, as soon as you get on campus, you start recruiting for consulting. And so my consulting friends were like already going to events like in August, like companies were already on site, people were casing, like it's a huge deal. Consulting club, big thing on
Mm.
campus, right? They host like casing sprints, finance club, same thing. They have a Wall Street boot camp and they bring in trainers. They bring in people to teach just like a crash course on like everything you need to know to recruit for finance. It is a frenzy. Like first year, you do not, if your friends are recruiting for consulting or banking, like you do not see them. For me, I like knew I wasn't going to recruit for either of those industries, but I will say it was still hard during this time because it takes a lot of willpower to say no to
Mm.
recruiting for something that like literally half your class is recruiting to. So like I did go to like info sessions and like I did do the finance boot camp just to like gain a skill that I don't really need. So it's like first year a frenetic fall recruiting time if you're going for consulting or finance. And then if you're doing like non-traditional, which is like anything except for consulting and finance, or tech, I would say, you do that all in the spring.
How much of the time was recruiting taking up, and did you do any other extracurriculars?
I would say I spent even, this is not typical. I know I spent more time than most people. I spent like a third of my time in the fall recruiting and then like 50% of my time in the spring recruiting, if not more. Like that was like the only thing that matters really
Yeah.
was like matter to me at least is like getting the job. Like that's why I went to the MBA. But I still managed to do some extracurriculars. At Yale, the way the clubs work is that every club is free to join. So you can literally be a member to like any club you want. In my opinion, the real way to be in a club is like if you take on these leadership positions and then you have like, you know, events that you need to coordinate and stuff. At the time, I thought I would attack sustainability through food. And so I ended up joining the leadership team for the food, agribusiness, and beverage club. We do a lot of fun, like food events, and we were like bringing in speakers from like Beyond Meat, Impossible Foods, and all that. And I also did Mint because I thought I was going to do impact investing back
Oh,
then. So
yes.
I did the impact investing competition. Yeah, I did that for a semester and that was cool because like you get real money, you're pitching to real investors. But yeah, I think like maybe one like nuance about Yale that's important is that like yeah, you should definitely like if you're interested in a club and like being involved with it, it's definitely worthwhile to take on like a leadership position within those organizations.
What did you think about the whole MBA experience?
I would say it's such a roller coaster. The job I ended up with is the job, exactly the job I thought I would end up with.
Mm.
But like, I tell you, it was not a straight line there. I love my MBA experience for like giving me 2 years to really sit down and think about like what I wanted to do with my career and why. And it gave me an opportunity to literally explore every possible career path that could get me to where I wanted to go. And it gave me the chance to try it and then very confidently say yes or
Mm.
no in response to whether or not I wanted to go down that path. So, like, I am now like super grateful I had this experience because now I can like sit in this role that I have and be like, you know what, actually, like this is exactly the role that I want. And like this is what makes me happy.
What advice now would you give to candidates applying to the Yale MBA now?
I'll split it into two parts. I suppose like candidates just applying to an MBA. I think number one, just like be clear about why you're applying to an MBA. For me, I got a lot more out of the experience because like I chose a school that was aligned with what I wanted to do and like would keep me accountable. I think we've covered that. I'm so happy I did that because that informed a lot of my decisions throughout my time during my MBA experience. So definitely keep that in mind when like choosing what schools to go to or apply to. With regards to the Yale MBA, I would say it is a school that is committed to business and society. It is in its nascency of trying to integrate that into its like curriculum. You can look at it in both ways and be like, oh, it's not what it's cracked up to be, or you can look at it as like, I have an opportunity to help build out this programming. And I have a friend there who like helped build out like the impact investing fund at Yale. And I think the other part of that is that like there's other people there who are also going in because of this mission who are valuable resources. There's plenty of people who are going into consulting, but like they have goals afterwards to like turn it into something else. Like they're going to consulting now because they know that consulting is a great way to network with people. And like this person I'm thinking of, she wants to like raise her own fund to do an impact investing or like venture investing in Africa. You know, the Yale MBA does attract the type of people that they say they attract, whether or not they're going to be your network or not. You should just like try and get to know people beyond just like exactly what they're doing there. But I think especially for the Yale MBA, lots of good knowledge to be shared and learn from your peers.
Well, thank you very much for all of your wealth of knowledge. I think that's going to be super helpful for everyone listening and watching. And we're going to say a fake goodbye and not actually sign off.
Okay.
All right, bye everyone.